Alright everyone, this is sort of a bewildered sticks video. I'm looking at the polls, and Biden has crashed and burned. He's got like almost a 15-point approval gap. He's down near 40%, but I'm thinking 40% of the country isn't partisan Democrats, and that means that there are still a handful of people that aren't just party loyalists that actually support the fucker. So the Democrats is like 38 points or something, not 42. What gives with that gap? I can understand if you're like a diehard Dem or a diehard Republican. Even if the person sucks, usually you say, well, I still support him because they got the right letter after the name. You got cognitive dissonance. This is more than half the U.S. public, by the way, that has massive cognitive dissonance. They probably shouldn't be voting. You know, the founders wanted people to be informed voters, not just voters. Well, you should go and there would be a lot less Republicans and Democrats in the country by registration if the voting public was more informed. Anyway, that means that there are millions of people, and these aren't dead people. These aren't people who voted illegally or something. These are actual U.S. citizens that support the dude. I'm thinking, why? What? Literally, name one accomplishment of the Joe Biden administration. There is none. Absolutely nothing. He's been in office for a year, and he managed to pass one bill. Other than that, his main contribution is ignoring the border, which his delegated border czar is equally culpable in, and that's why her approval is more deservedly down in the high 20s at best. Some of them put him in the mid-20s. Oh, Kamala is already a lame duck. That's why she's an absentee. She'd be hurting even more if she were out in public more often. But you've got a president who's clearly got cognitive decline. That's number one. You've got a shitty economy. Now they're saying, oh, by the way, this inflation might last even longer than we expected. They're slowly boiling the frog and admitting to you how bad the goddamn problem really is. I'm sorry, but I don't think this inflation is going anywhere for at least a year. I think that would be the good case scenario. The best case scenario is it's still going to last through the next midterms, by the way. Talk about curb stomping. Trust me, I think it's going to be a very interesting 2022, which is why the big tech companies are circling the wagons right now. This is one of the reasons Twitter just cracked down on journalism. This is one of the reasons I expect another wave of purges and new TOS changes from YouTube in the next few months. Typically, this is the time of year they do that. You definitely see it from Facebook. They're attempting to obfuscate reality so the public is not quite as aware about what's actually going on. So you got the border, you've got the bad economy, the inflation, those are tied. Shortages, which are, again, tied in, but they're also kind of their own separate thing. You have skyrocketing crime, especially affecting people who voted Democrat, inner city, and seeping into the suburbs. Not really rural America's problem. Small town America, again, a little bit of a boost, but it's definitely, broadly speaking, it's not evenly applied. You have every problem you can imagine, and you don't have any real victories. You have an infrastructure bill that is completely partisan, so I mean it's not helping you with independence support. Who are these people that aren't Dem diehards that support Joe Biden? I mean, I guess they must be just rich independents. They don't notice the problems going on. They don't live near the city. They live in the outer suburbs or a small town, so they're not city dwellers. They can't live anywhere near the border or near a community that's been flooded with migrants illegally by the Joe Biden admin flying them in the middle of the night, which has actually happened on numerous occasions. They obviously don't even watch the legacy media news at this point because they would have found something to bitch about. I guess they're off the grid because they don't know, I guess, the inflation rate or don't care. Like, hey, I never go to the store. I raise my own cows. I raise my own chickens. I make my own pickles. I hunt. I trap. I forage for roots and berries. I built my own house from the ground up with my bare hands. I didn't even need metal implements. I used stone tools. Oorah, it'd be like that primitive dwelling channel or something. Other than that, how could you be so out there that you wouldn't understand the nature of the number of problems? I mean, I'm in the Netherlands right now. I don't even need to go to the U.S. and see the sticker shock. Partially because other people have been helpfully showing me. I think that I've got over 100 separate images of people just showing me I did that stickers on gas pumps. I've probably got 200-300 showing shortages in stores. Now, some of that is, they do periodically restock parts of the store or reformulate things, so you can't always 100% vouch for the fact that that's shortage related, but it's certainly not 100% not shortages. It's quite a lot of images, video footage, and all that shit. I'm trying to think, though, of any particular group of Americans outside of the partisan core that have benefited from the Biden presidency. Not one single marker is better than it was under Trump. Biden keeps trying to take credit. Well, I created more jobs in my first year in office than all these other presidents. By the way, his infographic that he posted left out Barack Obama. I fucking wonder why. Did he not want to get outshined, or did he not want to shine any darkness on his former boss? I'm not actually sure which was the case. I'm pretty sure it's the former. I'm pretty sure that he doesn't want to be negatively compared to his former boss for egotistical and strategic purposes. Anyway, looking at this realistically, you've got an anemic jobs market. You do have high unemployment compared to what it got down to under Trump. You have lockdowns. Now Biden's new thing that he's coming out is saying, well, we're looking at the possibility of forcing anyone who enters the country, including U.S. citizens, to quarantine for a week when they get there. And maybe we'll even have fines if you don't listen to it. So he's failing on COVID too. None of the things that he suggested, and he's actually bunting almost on the Omicron variant, which actually is to his credit. One of the few things he's done insane, he's like, well, we're going to be cautious before we do all this lockdown stuff again. We're going to wait and see a little. That's actually more self-control than I expected from Biden. Wow, he had a lucid moment and went off script, I'm sure. That's definitely not what Fauci wanted. He wants to lock everything down fucking concentration camp mode because he's a fucking Nazi. But Biden is even failing on that. For a while, the only thing he had reasonable marks on was the COVID response. With this arrival of this new variant, that has now inverted. He's below water even in that polling. He's way below water on the border and economy. And by the way, those are the biggest issues. He's below water on crime, which is a lesser issue for many voters. Small town and suburban voters don't care as much. Inner city voters are heavily Dem partisan, so they're just going to ignore it. And the rural voters don't have to deal with it and lean heavily Republican and aren't really on the table. Minor issue of crime. Major issues: border, inflation, economy at large. COVID, a major issue, although it may not be by the midterms. We may have an asymptomatic variant, wipe it out, Ebola style for all we know. The so-called pandemic could be over because of nature. They'll still be locking things down every time somebody sneezes, but the disease itself will be an afterthought. Major issue. He's below water on that. If you think the economy sucks, if you think the president's demented, as a majority of voters do, by the way, most of them believe he's not mentally competent. If you believe the border is fucked up, if you believe that the crime rate is too high, if you believe in the incompetence of the administration, you hate Kamala Harris, and that's a supermajority of voters strongly disapprove of her. If all these things are wrong, why do you still say you approve of Joe Biden? I've got to assume that the preponderance of polls in that aggregate is so misweighted by registration, because most of them are polls of registered voters, and they drag the aggregate because they're using old numbers. They're using numbers from a half a decade ago when there were significantly more registered Democrats. Some of the polling firms have decided to adapt a different methodology. A significant proportion of those voters, and some Republicans as well, have defaulted to independent status. It's like a 6-point swing towards independent voters, and you're still using the old methodology. Oh wait, that would give Biden 3 or 4 more points of support in general, putting him actually at about 38. That's a more sane number, and still falling, of course, because most of these things, the border's not going to get better with Biden there. His borders won't even visit the border. The economy is not going to get better because of anything he does, because he can't do anything. It's just going to have to limp along, and you'll have to hope that the blue states don't keep the ports getting fucked up. Biden throwing every available resource right now at getting the ports operating 24/7 and trying to get more resources in there to offload things, because the shortages are beginning to eat away too at his presidential support. But he can't. What are you supposed to do? Essentially, you have to tell people to ignore your own lockdowns. Just like OSHA's vax mandate thing wouldn't have even applied to a significant number of U.S. workers because they work for companies with under 100 people. Just like Biden has slow-walked the response because he has to. Thus, by the way, proving we don't need any of these things. We don't need lockdowns and mandates. The President of the United States, informed directly by Fauci, apparently agrees because he's constantly going back on them, half-assing them and slow-walking them. By the way, that's why his OSHA mandate won't stand up in court. So really, who supports the dude? I guess the population of China supports Beijing Biden still. I guess that's enough. That's about all. Peace out.